The morning sun cast long shadows across the rocky terrain of the Afghan mountains as Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison adjusted his tactical gear one final time. His SEAL Team 6 unit had been inserted into this hostile region under cover of darkness, their mission clear but dangerous. Locate and eliminate a high-value Taliban commander who had been orchestrating attacks against coalition forces for months. Morrison's team consisted of 5 other highly trained operators. There was Chief Petty Officer Marcus Rodriguez, a sniper whose steady hands had saved countless lives in previous deployments. Petty Officer First Class David Chen served as their communications specialist, his equipment allowing them to stay connected with command despite the challenging mountain terrain. The team's medic, Petty Officer Second Class Alex Thompson, carried not only medical supplies, but also explosive ordnance disposal expertise. Petty Officer Second Class Ryan O'Connor handled demolitions and breaching operations, while the newest member, Petty Officer Third Class Samuel Brooks, brought fresh energy and exceptional marksmanship skills to the unit. Their target, Abdul Rashid, operated from a compound nestled deep in a valley surrounded by steep ridgelines. Intelligence reports indicated he would be meeting with other terrorist cell leaders that morning to plan coordinated strikes against American bases in the region. The window of opportunity was narrow, and the stakes were impossibly high. The team had been moving through treacherous mountain paths for over 6 hours, carefully navigating loose rock and narrow ledges while maintaining complete silence. Every step required precision, as a single misstep could send rocks tumbling down the mountainside, alerting enemy sentries to their presence. Morrison led from the front, constantly scanning the terrain ahead through his night vision goggles even as dawn began to break. As they approached their final observation point, Chen's radio crackled with an update from their command center. Bravo team, we have drone surveillance confirming target presence at the compound. Multiple vehicles arrived 30 minutes ago. You are cleared to proceed with the mission. Morrison acknowledged the transmission with 2 quick clicks of his radio, maintaining communication silence. He signaled his team to take positions along a rocky outcrop that provided excellent visibility of the target compound below. Through their scopes, they could see armed guards patrolling the perimeter, while smoke rose from cooking fires inside the walled structure. Rodriguez set up his sniper rifle, carefully calculating wind speed and distance. The compound lay nearly 800 meters below their position, requiring extreme precision for any long-range engagement. Thompson and O'Connor began preparing charges that would be needed to breach the compound's heavy wooden gates, while Brooks took up an overwatch position to monitor their rear approach route. The plan was methodical and precise. They would wait for confirmation that all targets were inside the main building, then move down the mountainside under cover of morning shadows. Rodriguez would provide overwatch from their current position, ready to eliminate any threats that emerged during their assault. The rest of the team would breach the compound, neutralize resistance, and extract their primary target for interrogation. Morrison studied the compound through his binoculars, noting the positions of guards and identifying potential escape routes their targets might use. The building's layout suggested it had been specifically chosen for defensive purposes, with thick walls and limited access points. Windows were small and positioned high, making it difficult for attackers to gain visual contact with occupants inside. Chen monitored radio chatter, listening for any indication that their presence had been detected. The Taliban were known for their extensive network of spotters throughout these mountains, and maintaining the element of surprise was crucial for mission success. So far, all communications suggested normal activity levels in the area. As the morning progressed, more vehicles arrived at the compound. Morrison counted at least 12 armed individuals moving between buildings, far more than initial intelligence had suggested. This discovery forced him to reconsider their approach strategy, as they would be significantly outnumbered once they initiated contact. Thompson checked his medical supplies one final time, knowing that mountain warfare in hostile territory left little room for error. Any wounded team member would need immediate treatment, and evacuation options were limited given their remote location. He mentally reviewed trauma procedures while keeping watch on potential infiltration routes down the mountainside. The team, had trained together for over 2 years, developing an almost telepathic understanding of each other's movements and capabilities. Morrison trusted each man implicitly, knowing they would execute their assigned roles without hesitation when the moment came. This level of trust and professionalism was what separated elite special operations units from conventional military forces. O'Connor studied the compound's defenses, identifying weak points in the perimeter wall where shaped charges could create the most effective breach points. His experience in urban combat operations had taught him to always plan multiple entry options, as initial assault plans rarely survived contact with enemy forces unchanged. Brooks, despite being the newest team member, had already proven himself in previous operations. His marksmanship scores were among the highest in SEAL Team 6 history, and his calm demeanor under pressure made him an ideal addition to Morrison's unit. He scanned the surrounding ridgelines through his scope, watching for any sign of enemy movement that might threaten their position. The compound below showed increasing activity as the morning wore on. Guards changed positions regularly, and Morrison noted their patrol patterns while calculating optimal timing for the assault. The main building's entrance remained heavily guarded, with at least 4 armed men maintaining constant watch. Morrison's radio received another update from command. Bravo team, satellite imagery confirms 8 vehicles now at target location. High-value individuals are confirmed inside the main structure. Weather conditions are deteriorating, with cloud cover moving in from the west. Your extraction window may be limited. The approaching weather added another layer of complexity to their mission. Heavy clouds would eliminate air support options and make helicopter extraction significantly more dangerous. Morrison realized they needed to accelerate their timeline if they hoped to complete the mission successfully. Chen began preparing his communication equipment for the assault phase, ensuring backup batteries were ready and encryption codes were current. Maintaining contact with command during active combat operations required redundant systems, as enemy forces often attempted to jam radio frequencies during firefights. The team made final equipment checks, testing weapon systems and confirming ammunition loads. Each man carried enough supplies for extended operations, but resupply would be impossible once they committed to the assault. Morrison reviewed hand signals with his team, ensuring everyone understood the modified approach plan necessitated by increased enemy numbers. As clouds began gathering over the mountain peaks, Morrison knew their window of opportunity was closing rapidly. The mission that had seemed straightforward during planning was becoming increasingly complex, but backing down was not an option. Too many American lives depended on eliminating Abdul Rashid and disrupting his terrorist network. The time for action was approaching, and SEAL Team 6 was ready to execute their most dangerous mission yet. Morrison raised his fist, signaling his team to prepare for movement. The clouds overhead were thickening rapidly, and they needed to begin their descent before weather conditions made the mission impossible. Rodriguez remained in his sniper position, scope trained on the compound's main entrance while the rest of the team began their careful approach down the mountainside. The terrain was treacherous, with loose shale and hidden crevices threatening to trip unwary operators. Chen moved directly behind Morrison, carrying the extra communication equipment needed to maintain contact with both Rodriguez above and their command center. Thompson followed, his medical pack secured tightly to prevent any rattling that might alert enemy sentries. O'Connor and Brooks brought up the rear, constantly scanning their flanks for signs of Taliban fighters who might be moving to intercept them. After 40 minutes of careful descent, the team reached a small plateau approximately 300 meters from their target. Morrison called a brief halt, allowing his men to catch their breath and make final preparations. Through his binoculars, he could see that activity at the compound had increased significantly. More guards were visible on the walls, and several men were moving between buildings with obvious urgency. Chen's radio crackled softly with an urgent transmission from command. "Bravo team, we're detecting increased radio chatter in your area. Multiple enemy units may be converging on your location. Recommend expedited timeline for mission completion." The news sent a chill through Morrison's spine. If Taliban forces were moving to reinforce the compound, his small team would soon face overwhelming odds. He quickly reassessed their options, realizing they needed to strike immediately before enemy reinforcements could arrive. O'Connor moved forward to examine the compound's perimeter wall, identifying the optimal breach point they had selected from above. The wall appeared to be constructed of mud brick reinforced with stones, typical of Afghan construction. His shaped charges would easily create a large enough opening for the team to assault through, but the explosion would eliminate any remaining element of surprise. Brooks took position to provide covering fire during the breach, his rifle trained on guard positions along the compound walls. His role would be crucial during the initial assault, as enemy fighters would likely focus their attention on the breach point, where his teammates would be most vulnerable. Thompson prepared his medical equipment for immediate deployment, knowing that combat injuries were almost inevitable given the odds they faced. He mentally reviewed the location of the nearest helicopter landing zone, calculating how long it would take to move a wounded teammate to safety if evacuation became necessary. Rodriguez's voice came through their earpieces from his overwatch position high above. "I count 15 tangos visible in the compound, with at least 6 more inside the main building based on movement patterns. Weather is deteriorating rapidly up here, visibility dropping fast." Morrison acknowledged the report while studying the compound layout one final time. Their intelligence had been accurate about the building's defensive design, but seriously underestimated the number of enemy fighters they would encounter. Proceeding with the mission meant accepting risks that exceeded normal operational parameters, but the importance of their target justified the increased danger. Chen established final communication protocols with their command center, confirming extraction coordinates and emergency backup plans. The approaching weather meant helicopter support would be limited, and ground-based evacuation might become their only option if things went wrong during the assault. The compound below showed signs of preparation for departure. Several vehicles were being loaded with equipment and supplies, suggesting their targets might be planning to leave soon. Morrison realized they were facing a narrow window of opportunity that was closing rapidly. O'Connor completed his reconnaissance of the breach point, confirming that his explosives would create an adequate opening without bringing down adjacent sections of wall that might block their entry route. He set the charges carefully, running detonation wire back to their assault position while remaining concealed from enemy observation. Brooks reported movement on the surrounding ridgelines that might indicate Taliban reinforcements were approaching the area. Through his scope, he detected what appeared to be armed figures moving along mountain paths that would bring them to the compound within the next hour. Thompson checked his watch, calculating how long they had before their mission window closed. Completely. The combination of deteriorating weather, approaching enemy reinforcements, and their target's apparent preparation for departure meant they needed to act within the next few minutes or abort the mission entirely. Morrison made his decision. Despite the increased risks, the importance of eliminating Abdul Rashid and disrupting his terrorist network outweighed the dangers his team would face. He signaled O'Connor to prepare for detonation while positioning his other men for the assault phase. Rodriguez confirmed his overwatch position was secure, and he had clear fields of fire to support the assault team. His role would be critical during the initial breach, as enemy fighters would likely mass at the explosion point to repel their attack. Chen made final contact with command, reporting their intention to proceed with the assault despite increased enemy presence. The response was immediate and clear. "Bravo team, you are cleared to engage. High-value target elimination is priority 1. Extract immediately following mission completion." The team took their final positions, each man understanding his role in the complex operation about to unfold. Morrison felt the familiar pre-combat tension that every special operations soldier experienced before engaging the enemy. Years of training had prepared them for this moment, but success would depend on flawless execution under the most challenging circumstances. O'Connor raised, his hand finger poised over the detonator switch. Morrison scanned his team one last time, confirming everyone was ready. Brooks and Thompson had their rifles trained on the compound walls, ready to provide suppressive fire the moment the charges exploded. Chen was prepared to coordinate with Rodriguez's overwatch position while monitoring enemy radio communications. The compound below remained active, with guards continuing their patrols while unaware of the highly trained American Special Operations team preparing to assault their position. Morrison knew the next few minutes would determine whether their mission succeeded or failed catastrophically. Weather conditions continued deteriorating, with the first drops of rain beginning to fall. The clouds overhead were becoming increasingly dense, limiting visibility and making communication with aircraft more difficult. Morrison realized they were truly on their own now, with limited options for support or extraction if their assault encountered serious resistance. He took a deep breath, mentally reviewing the assault plan one final time. Once O'Connor triggered those charges, there would be no turning back. 6 highly trained Navy SEALs would be committed to a dangerous mission against superior numbers in hostile territory, with weather conditions that eliminated most of their support options. Morrison gave the final signal. The explosion shattered the morning quiet with devastating force. O'Connor's shaped charges blew a 6-foot gap in the compound's mud brick wall, sending debris flying in all directions. Morrison led the assault through the breach before the dust had settled, his rifle at the ready as he scanned for immediate threats. Enemy fighters reacted with surprising speed, their shouts filling the air as they scrambled to defensive positions. Muzzle flashes erupted from windows and rooftops as Taliban gunmen opened fire on the assault team. Brooks and Thompson provided covering fire from outside the compound, their accurate shots forcing enemy fighters to keep their heads down during the crucial first moments of the attack. Morrison moved quickly toward the main building, using vehicles and equipment stacks for cover as bullets whined overhead. Chen followed closely behind, his radio equipment allowing him to coordinate with Rodriguez's overwatch position while monitoring enemy communications. The compound was larger than it had appeared from above, with multiple buildings connected by covered walkways that provided concealment for defending fighters. O'Connor breached the main building's entrance with a smaller explosive charge, the wooden door splintering into fragments as the team rushed inside. The interior was dimly lit and filled with smoke from cooking fires, making it difficult to distinguish between armed combatants and civilian occupants. Rodriguez's rifle cracked. From his mountain position, his shots precisely eliminating enemy fighters who exposed themselves while trying to engage the assault team. His elevated position provided excellent visibility of the compound's layout, allowing him to direct his teammates toward their primary objectives while suppressing enemy resistance. Thompson treated a grazing wound on Chen's arm without breaking stride, the communications specialist having been struck by a ricocheting bullet during the initial breach. Despite the injury, Chen maintained radio contact with their command center while coordinating the team's movements through the compound's confusing layout. The main building proved to be a maze of small rooms connected by narrow corridors. Morrison led his team through systematic room-to-room clearing procedures, checking each space for their high-value target, while avoiding booby traps that Taliban fighters were known to employ in their safe houses. Enemy resistance intensified as they approached the building's central area. Automatic weapons fire echoed through the corridors as Taliban fighters attempted to establish defensive positions. O'Connor used flashbang grenades to disorient defenders before the team cleared each room, the explosions temporarily stunning enemy combatants and allowing the SEALs to gain tactical advantages. Brooks reported increased activity on the surrounding ridge lines, confirming that Taliban reinforcements were moving toward the compound. His position outside the main building allowed him to provide early warning of approaching threats while continuing to suppress enemy fighters within the compound. Chen intercepted radio communications indicating that their assault had triggered a coordinated response from multiple Taliban units in the area. Enemy fighters were converging on their position from several directions, turning what had been planned as a quick strike mission into a prolonged engagement against superior numbers. Morrison's team located their primary objective in a heavily secured room at the center of the main building. Abdul Rashid was found with 3 other high-ranking Taliban leaders, all armed and determined to resist capture. The ensuing firefight was brief but intense, with the confined space making accurate shooting crucial for both sides. Thompson provided immediate medical attention to O'Connor, who had been wounded during the assault on Rashid's position. A bullet had struck his leg, causing significant bleeding but missing major arteries. Despite his injury, O'Connor continued to function effectively, setting charges to destroy intelligence materials found in the room. Rodriguez reported that enemy reinforcements had reached the compound's perimeter and were beginning to surround the building. His sniper fire was keeping them at a distance, but ammunition was running low after the extended engagement. The team needed to extract immediately before becoming completely surrounded. Chen established emergency communication with their command center, requesting immediate helicopter extraction despite the deteriorating weather conditions. The response was disappointing. Cloud cover had dropped too low for safe helicopter operations, and ground-based extraction would require the team to reach a secure landing zone several kilometers away. Morrison made the difficult decision to continue the mission despite the challenging circumstances. With Rashid eliminated and valuable intelligence materials secured, the team's primary objectives had been achieved. However, getting out alive was becoming increasingly complicated as enemy forces tightened their grip around the compound. The Niue team fought their way back toward the breach point they had used to enter the compound, enemy fire intensifying with each step. Taliban fighters had repositioned themselves to create overlapping fields of fire, making movement extremely dangerous. Brooks provided covering fire from multiple positions, constantly relocating to avoid return fire while keeping escape routes. O'Connor's leg wound was affecting his mobility, forcing Thompson to provide additional medical support while the team moved. Despite the pain, O'Connor refused evacuation assistance, determined to keep pace with his teammates during the critical extraction phase of their mission. Rodriguez's overwatch position came under direct attack from Taliban fighters who had scaled the mountainside to reach his location. His radio transmissions became increasingly urgent as he engaged multiple enemies while trying to maintain support for the assault team below. The situation was deteriorating rapidly on all fronts. Chen discovered through intercepted communications the Taliban forces had established roadblocks on all major routes leading away from the compound area. The enemy was implementing a comprehensive strategy to prevent the American team from escaping the region alive. Morrison realized they were facing a situation that exceeded their worst-case planning scenarios. Surrounded by increasing numbers of enemy fighters with limited ammunition and no immediate extraction options, the team needed to find an alternative escape route that would allow them to evade capture or elimination. The compound itself was becoming untenable as enemy fire increased from all directions. Windows were being systematically targeted, and Taliban fighters were beginning to use rocket-propelled grenades against the building's walls. Morrison knew they had only minutes before their position became completely compromised. Thompson reported that his medical supplies were running low after treating multiple team members for various wounds sustained during the prolonged engagement. O'Connor's leg injury was manageable but would slow their movement significantly if they needed to travel long distances on foot. Brooks identified a possible escape route through a drainage ditch that ran behind the compound toward a rocky outcrop approximately 200 meters away. The route would provide some concealment from enemy observation, but would also expose the team to enfilade fire from fighters positioned on the surrounding ridgelines. Morrison weighed their limited options while enemy fire continued to intensify around their position. Every minute they remained in the compound increased the likelihood of being overwhelmed by superior numbers. The time had come to make a desperate bid for survival. Morrison gave the signal to move, and the team burst from the compound's rear exit in a coordinated rush toward the drainage ditch Brooks had identified. Enemy gunfire erupted immediately, bullets striking the ground around them as they sprinted across the open space. Thompson half-carried O'Connor, whose leg wound was making running extremely difficult. The drainage ditch provided temporary cover, but it also channeled them directly toward a Taliban position that had been established on higher ground. Morrison realized they were moving into what could become a killing zone if enemy fighters repositioned to take advantage of their predictable route. Chen's radio crackled with an urgent transmission from Rodriguez, whose voice was strained with combat. "Stress. Bravo team, I'm taking heavy fire up here. Multiple enemy squads moving to cut off your escape routes. My position is about to be overrun." The news sent a wave of dread through Morrison's mind. Rodriguez's overwatch position had been their ace in the hole, providing crucial fire support and intelligence about enemy movements. Without his sniper covering them, The team would be operating blind against an enemy that knew the terrain intimately. Brooks took point as they moved through the ditch, his rifle sweeping constantly for threats while the team advanced in single file. The rocky walls provided excellent protection from direct fire, but they also limited visibility and created perfect conditions for an ambush if Taliban fighters had anticipated their route. Thompson struggled to maintain pace while assisting O'Connor, whose blood loss was becoming more significant despite field dressings applied to his wound. The medic made the difficult decision to inject O'Connor with a stimulant that would temporarily mask his pain and improve his mobility, knowing the treatment carried risks, but was necessary for team survival. Enemy fighters appeared at the ditch's far end, their weapons trained on the approaching Americans. Morrison immediately signaled for the team to take cover while he assessed their tactical situation. They were trapped in a narrow channel with enemies blocking their escape route and Taliban reinforcements closing in from behind. Chen attempted to contact their command center for emergency support, but atmospheric conditions were interfering with radio communications. The mountains created natural barriers to radio waves, and the approaching storm was generating electrical interference that made long-range communication nearly impossible. O'Connor, despite his wound and pain medication, managed to deploy a small explosive device at a narrow point in the ditch behind their position. If Taliban fighters followed them into the channel, the improvised booby trap would eliminate several enemies and potentially block pursuit by causing a cave-in. Rodriguez's voice came through their earpieces one final time, his transmission broken and filled with static. Taking fire from multiple directions cannot maintain position much longer. Good luck down there. The radio went silent, leaving Morrison's team without their eyes in the sky and crucial fire support. Morrison made a key, desperate decision. Rather than continuing through the ditch toward the waiting Taliban fighters, he ordered his team to scale the rocky walls and attempt to outflank their enemies. The maneuver would expose them to fire from multiple directions, but staying in the ditch meant certain capture or death. Brooks led the climb, using his combat knife to create handholds in the rocky wall, while enemy bullets struck around him. His physical conditioning and rock climbing experience proved invaluable as he established an initial route that his teammates could follow. Thompson rigged an improvised rappelling system to help O'Connor scale the wall despite his leg wound. The injured SEAL gritted his teeth and climbed with determination, refusing to become a burden that might cost his teammates their lives. Chen monitored enemy radio traffic while climbing, learning that Taliban commanders were coordinating a systematic sweep of the area designed to eliminate any possibility of American escape. Multiple units were being repositioned to create an inescapable net around their current location. The team reached the top of the ditch to find themselves on a barren plateau surrounded by enemy positions. Muzzle flashes were visible in multiple directions as Taliban fighters engaged them from concealed positions among the rocks. Morrison realized they had climbed directly into the center of an enemy stronghold. O'Connor's explosive device detonated in the ditch below, the sound echoing across the mountainside as several Taliban fighters who had been pursuing them were caught in the blast. The explosion bought them precious minutes but also revealed their exact position to every enemy unit in the area. Brooks spotted what appeared to be a cave entrance approximately 50 meters away, partially concealed by fallen rocks and scrub vegetation. The natural shelter might provide temporary protection while they planned their next move, but reaching it would require crossing open ground under direct enemy fire. Thompson applied fresh bandages to O'Connor's wound, noting that the earlier stimulant injection was beginning to wear off. The demolitions expert was struggling to maintain consciousness, and his mobility was decreasing rapidly despite his determination to keep fighting. Morrison counted muzzle flashes and estimated they were facing at least 20 enemy fighters from their current position alone. The Taliban had clearly planned for the possibility of American special operations raids and had prepared defensive positions throughout the area. Chen reported that his radio equipment had been damaged during the climb, eliminating their ability to communicate with command or call for emergency extraction. The team was now completely isolated, fighting for survival against overwhelming odds in hostile territory with no outside support. Enemy fire intensified as Taliban fighters realized the Americans were trapped on the plateau. Bullets struck the rocks around them with increasing frequency, sending stone fragments flying and making it dangerous to remain in any position for more than a few seconds. Morrison assessed their remaining ammunition, realizing that extended combat was not sustainable, given their limited supplies. Each team member was down to less than half their original combat load, and resupply was impossible under current circumstances. The cave entrance beckoned from across the open ground, but Morrison could see enemy positions that would provide overlapping fields of fire against anyone attempting to reach it. The route would be suicidal under normal circumstances, but they were rapidly running out of alternatives. Brooks volunteered to make the first attempt, reasoning that his speed and marksmanship skills gave him the best chance of suppressing enemy fire during the crossing. Morrison initially refused, but the logic was undeniable given their desperate situation. O'Connor struggled to his feet, determined to provide covering fire for his teammates despite his wounds. Thompson tried to convince him to remain prone, but the demolitions expert's warrior spirit would not allow him to be passive, while his friends risked their lives. The sound of helicopter rotors suddenly echoed across the valley, causing both American and Taliban fighters to scan the sky. Morrison's heart leaped with hope that extraction might be possible, but the sound faded quickly as the aircraft moved away without making contact. Chen discovered that his backup radio was still functional, though its range was extremely limited. He began transmitting emergency signals on multiple frequencies, hoping that friendly forces might detect their location and provide assistance. Morrison realized that traditional tactical approaches were inadequate for their current situation. They needed to take unprecedented risks and rely on individual initiative if any of them were going to survive the next few minutes. The time for conventional military doctrine had passed. Morrison made the agonizing decision to split his team. Brooks would attempt to reach the cave entrance and establish a defensive position, while Thompson would remain with O'Connor to provide medical support. Morrison and Chen would create a diversion by moving in the opposite direction, drawing enemy fire away from their wounded teammate and the cave approach. Brooks sprinted across the open ground with surprising speed, his rifle firing controlled bursts at enemy positions while he zigzagged to avoid incoming rounds. Taliban fighters redirected their attention to the moving target, giving Morrison and Chen the opportunity they needed to implement their own part of the desperate plan. The diversion worked initially, with several enemy positions engaging Brooks, while Morrison and Chen flanked around a rocky outcrop. However, Taliban commanders quickly recognized the tactical maneuver and began coordinating their response to counter the American team's splitting strategy. Thompson dragged O'Connor toward a small depression in the rocky ground that might provide better protection from enemy fire. The demolitions expert was losing consciousness intermittently, his blood loss becoming critical despite the medic's best efforts to control the bleeding. Brooks reached the cave entrance and immediately discovered it was deeper than it had appeared from a distance. The natural cavern extended back into the mountainside, potentially providing excellent defensive positions if properly utilized. However, he also found evidence that Taliban fighters had used the cave recently, including ammunition caches and communication equipment. Chen's limited-range radio suddenly crackled with an unexpected transmission. Unknown American unit, this is Eagle 1. We have been monitoring emergency frequencies. What is your location and status? The voice belonged to an American pilot, though Chen could not determine what type of aircraft was attempting contact. Morrison heard the transmission through his earpiece and felt a surge of hope. However, he also realized that providing their exact coordinates might compromise operational security if Taliban forces were monitoring the same frequency. The decision of how much information to reveal could determine whether rescue arrived or additional enemies. Enemy fire concentrated on Morrison and Chen's position as Taliban fighters attempted to eliminate what appeared to be the team's leadership element. Bullets struck the rocks around them with increasing accuracy, indicating that enemy marksmanship was improving as the engagement continued. Thompson administered another stimulant injection to O'Connor, knowing it might be the last medical intervention he could provide given their limited supplies. The demolitions expert's pulse was becoming irregular, and his skin was taking on the pale color that indicated severe blood loss. Brooks discovered that the cave's rear chamber contained Taliban communication equipment that was still operational. Using his limited knowledge of enemy radio procedures, he began broadcasting false information designed to confuse Taliban units and possibly redirect them away from his teammates' positions. Chen made the critical decision to transmit their approximate coordinates to Eagle 1, using coded language that would be difficult for enemy forces to interpret. Eagle 1, we are approximately 2 clicks northeast of primary objective, taking heavy fire from multiple directions. Request immediate assistance. The response came quickly, but was not what they hoped to hear. Copy your transmission. We are conducting operations in your area, but cannot provide direct fire support due to weather conditions. Attempting to coordinate ground-based assistance. Morrison realized that help, if it came at all, would not arrive in time to prevent their position from being overrun. Taliban fighters were advancing methodically, using covering fire and tactical movement that demonstrated sophisticated military training, rather than the amateur tactics often associated with insurgent forces. O'Connor managed to whisper instructions to Thompson about the location of additional explosive devices in his pack. Despite his critical condition, the demolitions expert was still thinking tactically about ways to help his team survive the increasingly hopeless situation. Brooks engaged enemy fighters who were attempting to approach the cave entrance, his accurate rifle fire forcing them to seek better cover. However, he could see that Taliban forces were positioning themselves to assault the cave from multiple angles, making his defensive position untenable. Chen's radio detected multiple helicopter signatures approaching the area, but atmospheric interference made it impossible to determine whether they were friendly aircraft or Taliban reinforcements. The uncertainty added another layer of stress to an already desperate situation. Thompson noticed that O'Connor had lost consciousness, and his pulse was becoming increasingly weak. Without immediate medical evacuation, the demolitions expert would not survive his wounds. The medic faced the horrible reality that he might lose a teammate despite his best efforts. Morrison observed enemy movement patterns and realized that Taliban forces were implementing a coordinated assault plan designed to eliminate all escape routes while concentrating overwhelming firepower on American positions. The enemy's tactical sophistication was far beyond what intelligence reports had indicated. Enemy fighters began using rocket-propelled grenades against the cave entrance, the explosions sending rock fragments flying in all directions. Brooks was forced to withdraw deeper into the cavern, but this also limited his ability to provide covering fire for his teammates. Chen intercepted Taliban radio communications, indicating that enemy commanders had identified their cave position and were preparing a final assault. Multiple units were being positioned to attack simultaneously, making defense nearly impossible given their limited ammunition and manpower. The sound of helicopter rotors returned, this time much closer and apparently circling their general area. Morrison strained to identify the aircraft type through the sound signature, hoping to determine whether rescue was approaching or additional enemy forces were being deployed. Thompson made the painful decision to leave O'Connor in the most protected position available while he attempted to rejoin his teammates for the final stand. The demolitions expert was beyond medical help under current circumstances, and Thompson's rifle was needed to help defend their remaining positions. Brooks discovered that the cave had a secondary entrance that emerged on the opposite side of the ridge. However, using this escape route would mean abandoning O'Connor, who was too critically wounded to be moved without proper medical equipment and additional personnel. Morrison weighed their impossible options, while enemy fire intensified. Around their position, every decision carried terrible consequences, and traditional military ethics conflicted with the practical requirements for survival in their current situation. Chen's radio suddenly received a transmission on a frequency that indicated American Special Operations Forces were operating in the immediate area. The message was brief and coded, but suggested that rescue might be closer than previously thought. Enemy fighters began their final assault, moving in coordinated teams toward all known American positions. Morrison realized they had perhaps minutes before being overwhelmed, and whatever was going to happen needed to occur immediately. The helicopter sound was now directly overhead, though low cloud cover made visual identification impossible. Morrison had to decide whether to reveal their positions by signaling the aircraft, risking exposure to enemy fire if the helicopter proved hostile. Brooks heard footsteps approaching the cave's main entrance and prepared for close-quarters combat. His ammunition was nearly exhausted, and hand-to-hand fighting seemed inevitable as Taliban fighters closed in on his position. A single rifle shot echoed across the valley from an unexpected direction, its sound distinctly different from the weapons being used by either side in the current engagement. Morrison looked up toward a ridge that had appeared empty, wondering if Rodriguez might still be alive and engaging the enemy. The single shot from the hidden ridge struck with devastating precision, eliminating the Taliban commander who had been coordinating the final assault. Enemy fighters immediately began looking toward the ridgeline, their coordinated advance momentarily disrupted by the unexpected threat from a new direction. Morrison felt a surge of recognition as he observed the shot's accuracy and timing. Only one person could make that kind of precision shot under these conditions. Rodriguez was not only alive but had repositioned himself to provide overwatch from a concealed position that gave him clear fields of fire over the entire engagement area. A second shot rang out from the ridge, this one targeting a Taliban machine gun position that had been suppressing Brooks in the cave. The enemy gunner dropped instantly, and his weapon fell silent. Rodriguez had apparently been observing the entire battle, and was systematically eliminating the most dangerous enemy threats. Chen's radio crackled with a familiar voice. "Bravo team, this is Rodriguez. I'm in position on the North Ridge with clear sight lines. Taliban reinforcements are approaching from the east, but I can buy you time to extract." The sniper's calm voice brought immediate relief to Morrison's team. Rodriguez had somehow escaped the enemy assault on his original position and relocated to an even better overwatch point. His new location provided commanding views of all approach routes while keeping him concealed from enemy observation. Brooks emerged from the cave entrance as Rodriguez's covering fire eliminated several Taliban fighters who had been preparing to assault his position. The sniper's shots were coming at perfectly timed intervals, each one targeting enemies who posed the greatest immediate threat to the trapped SEAL team. Thompson reached Morrison's position while dragging his medical pack, having made the difficult decision to leave O'Connor in the most protected cover available. The demolitions expert remained unconscious but stable, his breathing shallow but steady despite the critical blood loss. The helicopter sound intensified overhead, and Morrison finally caught a glimpse of the aircraft through a break in the cloud cover. The distinctive silhouette belonged to an American Special Operations helicopter, its crew apparently attempting to locate the embattled SEAL team despite the challenging weather conditions. Chen established radio contact with the helicopter crew, providing coded coordinates and a brief situation report. Eagle 6, we have 4 mobile and 1 critical casualty. Heavy enemy contact with friendly overwatch providing support. Request immediate extraction. The pilot's response carried urgency and determination. Copy your situation, Bravo team. We have visual on enemy positions and are preparing for emergency extraction. Mark your location with infrared strobe and prepare for fast rope insertion of additional personnel. Rodriguez continued his systematic elimination of enemy threats, his precision shooting creating gaps in Taliban positions that would allow the helicopter to approach safely. Each shot demonstrated the exceptional training and skill that made him one of the military's premier snipers. Morrison activated his infrared strobe, knowing it would be visible to the helicopter crew's night vision equipment while remaining invisible to Taliban fighters lacking similar technology. The signal would guide the rescue aircraft directly to their position during the critical extraction phase. Brooks returned to O'Connor's location and began preparing the unconscious demolitions expert for helicopter evacuation. Despite his critical condition, O'Connor would need to be moved quickly when the aircraft arrived, requiring careful coordination between the team and incoming rescue personnel. The helicopter appeared through the clouds, its crew displaying exceptional flying skills as they maneuvered through enemy fire toward the SEAL team's position. Door gunners on both sides of the aircraft engaged Taliban positions, their automatic weapons providing suppressive fire that complemented Rodriguez's sniper support. Chen coordinated between the helicopter crew and his teammates, ensuring everyone understood the extraction sequence that would get them safely aboard the aircraft. The procedure would need flawless execution, as any delays would expose the helicopter to concentrated enemy fire. Thompson prepared O'Connor for immediate medical evacuation, knowing that the helicopter likely carried advanced life support equipment that could stabilize the wounded SEAL during flight to a military hospital. Time was critical, but rescue was finally within reach. Rodriguez reported through his radio that additional Taliban reinforcements were approaching from multiple directions, their commanders apparently determined to prevent American forces from escaping the area. His ammunition was running low after the extended engagement, but he committed to providing covering fire until the last team member was safely aboard the helicopter. The aircraft touched down briefly while 4 additional special operations personnel fast-roped to the ground, immediately establishing a defensive perimeter around the landing zone. Their arrival doubled the American firepower available to hold off Taliban forces during the critical extraction phase. Morrison coordinated the loading sequence, ensuring O'Connor received priority placement aboard the aircraft where medical personnel could begin advanced treatment immediately. Thompson accompanied his patient, continuing medical support while the helicopter prepared for departure. Brooks and Chen boarded quickly, their ammunition nearly exhausted after the prolonged firefight. The additional personnel who had arrived with the helicopter took their places in the defensive perimeter, preparing to cover the aircraft's departure while engaging approaching enemy forces. Rodriguez's voice came through their earpieces one final time. "Bravo team is clear. I'm displacing to alternate extraction point. See you back at base." The snipers covering fire had been the crucial factor that allowed the rescue operation to succeed against overwhelming odds. The helicopter lifted off with Taliban fighters closing in from all directions, its door gunners engaging enemy positions, while the aircraft gained altitude and speed. Rodriguez's shots continued to ring out from the ridge, each one targeting enemies who threatened the departing aircraft. Morrison looked down at the compound where their mission had begun, now partially destroyed and surrounded by enemy forces. Despite the nearly catastrophic outcome, they had achieved their primary objective of eliminating Abdul Rashid and disrupting his terrorist network. O'Connor's vital signs stabilized during the flight as military medical personnel worked to repair his wounds using advanced equipment unavailable during ground operations. Thompson assisted the flight medics, his field treatment having saved his teammate's life during the critical minutes before evacuation. Chen established communication with their command center, providing an initial after-action report while the helicopter flew toward a secure military base. The mission had succeeded beyond all expectations, but at a cost that demonstrated the extreme dangers faced by special operations personnel. Brooks monitored radio frequencies for any sign that Rodriguez had reached his alternate extraction point safely. The sniper's sacrifice and exceptional skill had saved the entire team, proving once again why he was considered one of the military's most valuable assets. As the helicopter crossed into friendly airspace, Morrison reflected on the mission that had nearly cost them everything. The single shot from Rodriguez's hidden position had been the turning point that transformed certain defeat into successful extraction. Professional excellence and brotherhood had prevailed against impossible odds. The mountains faded behind them as the aircraft flew toward safety, carrying 6 American warriors who had completed one of the most dangerous missions in special operations history. Their success would save countless lives by disrupting enemy operations, justifying every risk they had accepted in service to their country.